My name is Ria, 30 years old. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday when I was a kid. Back then, before I understood what favoritism meant, before my sister Natalie realized she could destroy anything and I'd be blamed for standing too close. Before my parents turned every family gathering into a stage where I was the punchline and she was the princess. Back then, it was just turkey, board games, and the illusion that everyone at the table loved each other the same. Walking into their house this year felt like stepping back into a trap I already knew too well. The floors still creaked in the same places. The air smelled like burnt yeast rolls and too strong cleaning spray, and that old familiar sick feeling settled into my ribs like it had been waiting for me. I held a store-bought pie in one hand and a tote bag full of the items my mom had assigned me to bring. Natalie hadn't been assigned anything, of course. According to Mom, she works hard, sweetheart. She's too fragile for errands. Natalie was 27 and worked part-time at a boutique where she mostly took selfies for social media, but my parents spoke about her like she was single-handedly running NASA mission control. I was the one with the stable job and my own apartment, but somehow I was always the irresponsible one. The moment the door opened, Mom looked me up and down, her lips already tight. "You're late," she said. "I'm 10 minutes early," I answered quietly. She snatched the pie out of my hands like it offended her. "Your cousin Paige is already here. Your sister has been helping for hours. You know, it wouldn't kill you to put in a little effort for once." Natalie appeared behind her, leaning in the doorway like she was posing for a camera. Her sweater looked like it cost more than my monthly internet and electricity combined. "Oh my God," she groaned. "You brought a grocery store pie? You couldn't at least pretend you care?" My face heated, but I swallowed it down. "You told me to bring a pie, so I brought a pie." Natalie rolled her eyes dramatically and flounced away, satisfied. Mom muttered just loud enough for me to catch. Always doing the bare minimum, like it was a script she'd rehearsed. I stepped inside, already feeling smaller. My dad was in the living room watching football with uncles and cousins. When he saw me, he gave a brief nod. Not a greeting, just a head count. Every Thanksgiving, I felt more like a guest they tolerated than their eldest daughter. I had a job, bills, responsibilities. To them, none of that mattered. I was still the designated safety net for every mess Natalie left behind. By 4 o'clock, the house was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, who treated my parents' home like a community theater where they could watch our family perform Perfect Thanksgiving once a year. Mom thrived on it. She floated from room to room, arranging napkins and smiles, saving the ugliest scenes for when she had the biggest audience. Natalie strutted around the dining room, telling everyone about her new opportunity, some influencer program that mostly involved networking lunches and posting sponsored content. She talked like she was the next Oprah, waving her hands, forgetting entire chunks of grammar, and Mom hovered behind her, nodding proudly as if Natalie had discovered electricity. I helped quietly in the kitchen, refilling bowls, checking the rolls, stacking plates. Every time I passed through the dining room, I could feel the unspoken script pressing down on me. Be quiet, be useful, be grateful, don't outshine the princess. Then Dad walked in with his beer and his loud voice, cutting through the noise like he always did when he wanted an audience. "So, honey," he said to Mom, but loud enough for half the room to hear, "did you talk to your sister about the rent yet?" I froze. Conversations around me softened, like someone turned down the volume. I could feel eyes shift toward me. Natalie twirled her hair, looking beautifully helpless. "Yeah, she hasn't sent anything," she said, pouting. "I told her you'd handle it." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" Mom stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Natalie's rent is due tomorrow. You know that." "No," I said carefully. "I don't. She never told me she needed help this month." Dad frowned at me like I was being deliberately stupid. "Every month is the same, Ria." I blinked. "No, it's not. You said I only needed to help during emergencies." Mom cut in sharply, voice slicing through the room. "This is an emergency. Your sister is building her career. She doesn't need stress like this." Natalie looked at me with wide, fake innocence. "I just assumed you'd help. You make more than I do." "I make more because I work full-time," I said, my voice trembling, even though I tried to keep it steady. "You work 15 hours a week." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. A few forks paused halfway to mouths. Someone sucked in a breath. Mom's eyebrows shot up like rockets. "How dare you talk to your sister that way at Thanksgiving?" she snapped. "I didn't say anything wrong," I whispered. Dad stood from his chair slowly, deliberately, like he was sliding into a familiar role. "You always ruin holidays with your attitude," he said. "Just do what family does and help your sister." "I help her all the time," I said, my voice thin with exhaustion. "She never helps me back." Natalie gasped dramatically. "Wow, so you're attacking me now?" I tried to respond, but my throat closed. I wasn't attacking anyone. I was drowning. Mom stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Rhea, you will pay her rent today." I took a breath. I knew what answer they wanted. I also knew what it would cost me. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. "I can't. I have my own bills. My car insurance just—" Dad moved fast. He grabbed my arm and yanked me forward so hard the room tilted for a second. Chairs scraped. Someone gasped. The laughter died instantly. "Pay her rent," he hissed into my face. "I can't," I choked out, my whole body trembling. "I don't have enough this month." He shoved me backward. I hit the edge of the wall near the kitchen doorway, pain exploding through my shoulder. Mom's face twisted into something feral. "I am done with you embarrassing this family," she snarled, and then she slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the dining room like a plate shattering on tile. My cheek went numb. I tasted blood. The room froze. Forks hovered in the air. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" But Mom wasn't finished. She grabbed my wrist and shook it. "You pay your sister's rent or get out of my house." Natalie folded her arms smugly, watching like she'd just queued up her favorite show. Dad's voice boomed again. "Ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you." Something inside me shifted. Not a dramatic explosion, just a quiet internal click. A lock turning. Fear sliding aside to make room for something else. My voice came out surprisingly calm. "Let go of me." Mom scoffed. "Or what?" I looked around the room. At Paige, wide-eyed. At uncles and aunts who had stopped mid-bite. At cousins, staring openly at the bruise already blooming along my cheek. Years of Thanksgivings flashed through my mind. Being mocked, blamed, pushed aside, used as a punching bag so Natalie never had to feel friction. And now, in front of everyone, they were willing to hit me because I refused to fund her life. I straightened. Dad barked, "Don't you walk away from me." But I already had. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't give the speech burning the back of my throat. I just turned and walked toward the hallway, their voices snapping behind me like rubber bands that no longer reached. At the coat rack, I paused and looked back over my shoulder. "You chose the wrong day to show everyone who you really are," I said, voice flat. Mom's smile faltered. Dad's eyes narrowed. Natalie's arms dropped to her sides. For the first time in my life, I could see it. The realization settling over them that everyone in that room had just watched the curtain drop. I stepped outside into the cold November air, the wind slicing across my burning cheek. Their shouting muffled behind the door, but it didn't matter. Something had shifted. Thanksgiving, I realized, wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The next morning, I woke with a throbbing cheek and a shoulder that protested every movement. The bruise beneath my eye had darkened overnight, a shadow blooming across skin that had endured far too many accidental hits, playful shoves, and disciplinary slaps over the years. But this one wasn't private. This time, they had done it in front of a room full of people, and that changed everything. I stood at the bathroom mirror, touching the swelling, trying to place what felt stranger, my parents' violence or the fact that, for once, other people had seen it. My own reflection looked back at me like a stranger. Someone tired. Someone pushed 1 inch too far. Someone finally done. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Natalie, where is the rent money? Mom said you'd send it by morning. Stop being dramatic. We all know you can afford it." The entitlement radiated off the screen so strongly it almost made me laugh. Natalie could afford her rent. She just didn't want to pay it when she had an entire family trained to pick up her slack. Why struggle when you can be adored for falling apart? Another buzz, Mom calling. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, before answering only because I wanted to hear how far she'd go this time. "You embarrassed us last night," Mom snapped, skipping any greeting. "You're going to fix it by sending your sister the money, and you're going to apologize for your attitude." I stared into the mirror at my bruised face. "I'm not apologizing," I said flatly. Dad's voice thundered from behind her. "You owe us respect." "No," I said quietly. "I don't owe you anything." Silence. Pure, shocked silence. They had never heard me say anything like that. Mom recovered fast. She always did. "If you don't pay, we'll tell the family you attacked us last night," she snapped. "You know they take our side. Don't make this harder on yourself. And there it was, their favorite weapon. Not truth, not decency, reputation. My breath was steady when I answered, "Do whatever you want." The phone went dead silent. Then Mom hung up. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. My phone buzzed again minutes later. Aunt Linda. Her voice trembled. "I saw everything, Rhea. I'm so sorry. And your parents already started telling people you had a breakdown. But if you need me to say what I witnessed, I will." My throat tightened. Linda had never taken sides before, not in 30 years. She always tried to stay neutral, helpful, but never confrontational, which made this moment heavier than the bruise on my cheek. "Thank you," I whispered, and I meant it. A few hours later, my cousin Paige texted, "What your parents did was messed up. They're telling people you lost control, but we all saw the opposite. If you need statements from us, we're here." Statements. Plural. Slowly, I felt something shift inside me, something old and shaky turning into something solid. The fear I had carried my whole life began to loosen its grip. For the first time, I realized something monumental. This time, I wasn't alone. This time, I wasn't the only witness. This time, they couldn't bury the truth under a mountain of theatrics, and that terrified them. By evening, another message came in. Dad's number. "Let's talk calmly. We can fix this. Just send the money first." Fix it. I stared at the text, and something inside me finally clicked into place. I wasn't fixing anything. I was done fixing things I didn't break. What I wanted, what I needed, wasn't revenge. It was accountability. Real, undeniable accountability. The kind they couldn't smooth over with excuses or lies, or by painting me as the unstable one. And amazingly, unexpectedly, the universe seemed to agree. The next morning, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, Aunt Linda stood there wearing a heavy coat and holding a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a thick binder in the other. Before I could even ask, she said, "Yes, I wrote a statement, and so did 3 others." She handed me the binder. Inside were 4 typed pages, Linda's account, Paige's Uncle Rob's, and even a letter from Mrs. Harker, the neighbor who'd been standing near the kitchen doorway during the argument. Each letter described everything they'd seen. Dad shoving me, Mom slapping me, the demand for money, the screaming, the threat to twist the story, the humiliation. My throat tightened so painfully I had to swallow twice. I wasn't used to being believed, being chosen, being defended. Linda squeezed my hand. "Your parents' biggest fear has always been losing control of the story. They've controlled it for decades. It's your turn now." My turn. The words echoed through me, settling somewhere deep. Somewhere that had been starved for validation for years. She was right. My parents weren't afraid of the truth. They were afraid of people hearing the truth. And as fate would have it, the entire extended family was gathering again that evening at my Aunt Dorothy's house for a Thanksgiving weekend dinner. The kind of event my parents loved. Crowds, attention, admiration. Normally I'd avoid it, hide, protect my peace. But this time I had witnesses. This time I had the truth in writing. This time, they couldn't silence me. So I got dressed, grabbed the binder, and headed toward the dinner. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going there as the scapegoat. I was going there as the truth. And I already knew. This time, they weren't ready. Dorothy's house sat glowing at the end of the street like it always did during the holidays. Warm lights in every window, wreath on the door, the kind of home that looked safe from the outside. But as I stood on the porch with the binder clutched to my chest, it felt like I was carrying something radioactive. A truth so potent that once released, it would change the shape of this family forever. When I stepped inside, conversations faltered, heads turned. The room didn't go silent, but it shifted, like air pressure dropping before a storm. People tried not to stare at the bruise on my cheek, but they did. They always did with things they weren't sure they were allowed to acknowledge. My mother's face drained instantly. Dad stiffened, like someone had jammed a steel rod down his spine. Natalie froze mid-scroll on her phone, eyes widening when she saw the binder in my hand. Mom hurried toward me, blocking my path with a brittle smile that cracked around the edges. "Don't start anything here," she whispered sharply, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard. She was scared. Really, truly scared. I didn't react, just stepped past her like she wasn't even there. "I'm not starting anything," I said quietly. That was true. I wasn't starting anything. They were. I walked straight into the dining room, the heart of every family gathering, and placed the binder on the center of the table, right next to the turkey. Conversations dropped to complete silence this time. Dad's voice broke first. What is that? I met his eyes, calm, steady, more in control than I had ever been in front of him. The truth, I said. That single sentence changed the temperature of the entire room. Dorothy, who had never been afraid of confrontation in her life, stepped forward. She opened the binder without hesitation. Her eyes moved across the page, then widened, slowly, then sharply. So all of this happened in my sister's house on Thanksgiving? She asked, her voice carrying through the dining room. Mom lunged toward the table. This is exaggerated. No, Dorothy cut her off, lifting the papers. These were written by people who have no reason to lie, and we all saw your daughter's injuries. Natalie tried to laugh, a brittle, nervous sound. Come on, it wasn't that serious. Uncle Rob stood up from his chair so suddenly it screeched across the floor. Enough, he said, pointing at my parents. We watched you shove her. We watched you slap her. We watched you scream at her because she wouldn't pay your other daughter's bills. Paige stepped closer. They hit her. They humiliated her, and Natalie benefited from every second of it. Natalie's face crumpled, her mouth opening like she wanted to deny it, but nothing came out. Dad's face turned red, eyes darting around like a trapped animal trying to find an escape. You're turning the family against us, he said, his voice shaking with anger or fear, maybe both. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply said, no, I'm not turning anyone. You did that yourself. Mom tried to regain control, plastering on a smile so strained it looked painful. We were disciplining her. She overreacted. Dorothy slammed the binder shut, the sound making several people jump. You laid your hands on a grown woman over rent money. That's not discipline. That's abuse. A murmur spread through the room. Shock, anger, disbelief. Someone whispered, I can't believe they did that. Someone else said, this is disgusting. Mom and Dad felt it. The shift. The loss of control. Their faces went pale in real time, the power they held for decades, evaporating with every second that passed. Mom reached out toward me, voice cracking. Sweetheart, let's talk privately. No. I stepped back from her hand. No more private conversations. No more rooms where you twist everything and make me feel insane. Dad tried next. Sit with us. We can fix this. You can't, I said. You didn't break me in private. You don't get to fix me in private. The words hit them harder than the binder. Natalie, looking suddenly small despite her perfect makeup and expensive sweater, whispered, So, are you still paying my rent? I stared at her like she had just spoken a language only she understood. No, never again. Her mouth fell open. But I can't afford... That's not my problem, I said. It never was. Mom swayed like the floor tilted beneath her. You're really doing this to family? I shook my head. You did this. I'm just not covering for you anymore. Then the final blow came, from someone none of us expected. Aunt Linda stepped forward and raised her voice, strong and steady. Until you get help and apologize, genuinely, without lies, without manipulation, you two are not welcome at any more family gatherings. Gasps, whispers, shock rippling across every face. Mom's mouth dropped open. Dad's eyes widened. Natalie covered her lips with her hands. There it was. Exile. The worst punishment for the people who live for spotlight and admiration. You can't be serious, Dad choked. But she was. And everyone nodded. Every witness. Every relative they relied on. Every person who had silently watched their performances for years. Not anymore. Mom stepped toward me one last time, desperation hollowing her voice. Rhea, please, don't do this. We can talk. We can fix last night. Just don't let them... I stepped back again. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. This is accountability. Her face crumpled. For once, she had no script to hide behind. I turned away as they began begging. Soft, frantic, human. Not powerhouses, not tyrants. Just two people suddenly facing the truth they could no longer bury. The door closed behind me, and cold air hit my lungs like freedom finally had a temperature. Thanksgiving had started with them hitting me in front of everyone. It ended with the entire family watching them fall to their knees. And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel weak. I felt free. When I stepped out into the cold night after the confrontation at Dorothy's, the November air felt different on my skin. Sharper, clearer, almost like a rebirth and a bruise at the same time. For the first time in my life, the weight I'd carried on my shoulders didn't follow me out the door. I walked toward my car, feeling lighter, but also feeling the ghost of my parents behind me. Their shock still ringing in my ears. I had revealed the truth they feared most, and there was no taking it back. At home, I set the binder on my coffee table. It looked small now, harmless even, but I knew better. It was a weapon forged out of everything they tried to hide, a living record of pain and witnesses and truths that wouldn't stay buried. I stared at it for a moment, tracing the edge of the cover with my finger, then finally exhaled. My phone buzzed. For a brief, foolish second, I thought it might be an apology, but it wasn't. It was Natalie. Wow, you really made a scene tonight. People are saying Mom and Dad might not come to Christmas this year because of you. Happy now? I didn't reply. It wasn't worth the energy. When I didn't answer, she called. I let it ring. She called twice more. Finally, I picked up. Not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I wanted to hear what denial sounded like in real time. Rhea, she snapped. The moment I answered, "What did you think you were doing? You humiliated them." They humiliated themselves, I said steadily. You could have just paid my rent. There it was. Natalie wasn't afraid for our parents. She wasn't upset about the truth coming out. She was terrified the gravy train had stopped. You're unbelievable, she hissed. Mom cried the whole drive home. Dad's furious. You ruined Thanksgiving. No, I corrected. They ruined Thanksgiving. I just stopped pretending it didn't happen. Natalie scoffed loudly. Whatever. You're dramatic. Mom and Dad said you twisted everything. They said you attacked them first. And that right there was the moment I understood something vital. Natalie wasn't merely entitled. She wasn't merely benefiting from the abuse. She was a product of it, a child molded by parents who taught her she was special by grinding someone else down. Control was her inheritance. Blame was her lineage. But that inheritance ended tonight. I'm not doing this with you, I said, and hung up. I didn't block her. Not yet. Let her sit with the silence she'd never been forced to face before. The next morning, I woke to missed calls. Mom, Dad, Natalie, unknown numbers, relatives who probably wanted the real story. I ignored them all. I made coffee. I watched the steam curl upward, thin and fragile, fading into the light. Strange how something so simple suddenly felt revolutionary. Around noon, I finally got a message from someone I didn't expect. Aunt Dorothy, I'm proud of you. That needed to happen. If you need support or just a place to breathe, I'm here. A few minutes later, Uncle Rob texted, Your parents need help. Real help. You didn't do anything wrong. Then Paige, everyone is talking today, and guess what? Most people are on your side. On my side. It felt unreal, terrifying, beautiful. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to being seen without being blamed. I wasn't used to a family member saying, You're right, instead of be quiet. The rest of Sunday passed in a strange fog. I cleaned my kitchen for no reason. I rearranged shoes by the door. I tried to watch a show but didn't absorb any of it. My mind kept drifting back to what Aunt Linda said. It's your turn now. My turn. The phrase felt like a warm ember in my chest. Not a raging fire, not vengeance, just heat. Strength. The beginning of something. That evening, my doorbell rang. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting Natalie with a camera crew or my parents demanding a private talk so they could twist the narrative again. But it wasn't them. It was Aunt Linda holding 2 paper bags from a local restaurant. You probably haven't eaten, she said gently, and I didn't want you sitting alone tonight. My throat tightened. I wasn't alone, I tried to joke. I had bruises for company. She didn't laugh. Instead, she stepped in and set the bags on the counter. You were brave, she said. Braver than anyone else in that room. We sat together at the table while the early darkness settled outside. She ate quietly while I picked at food I barely tasted. At one point, I whispered, Do you think they're going to hate me forever? She looked at me with soft, firm eyes. Maybe. But that's because they lost control of you. And losing control feels like hate when you rely on it too much. I nodded slowly. And what if they never change? I asked. What if they just stay who they are? Then you'll stay who you're becoming, she said. Someone who doesn't need their permission to exist. I didn't cry then. I waited until she left, closing the door gently behind her. Only then did everything I'd been holding crack open. Fear, relief, grief, hope, all spilling together in a quiet, shaking release I hadn't allowed myself in years. I slid down against the door, covering my bruised cheek with one hand and feeling, for the first time in decades, something like peace. Not happiness, not closure. Just peace. The kind that comes from knowing the worst already happened and you survived it. The kind that comes from knowing you no longer belong to the people who hurt you. Thanksgiving hadn't been the ending I expected. It was the ending I needed. And the beginning of everything I'd never had the courage to claim before.